So, picture this. You're hosting a fun pool party, the music's bumping, everyone's having a great time, until a neighbor, let's call her Karen, decides it's all too much for her. She calls the cops, claiming we're disturbing the peace. Sounds like a classic HOA issue, right? But here's the twist. This wasn't just any party. The cops weren't showing up to shut us down. They were actually part of a local fundraiser. Yep, it turns out they were there to support a charity event. Now, imagine the look on Karen's face when she finds out the very people she tried to get rid of were the ones helping raise money for a good cause. Talk about a major plot twist. But that's not where the story ends. Oh no. Things got even more complicated from there. The tension between neighbors started to grow, and soon it wasn't just about the noise. It was about something much bigger. What happens when a small misunderstanding turns into an epic showdown? And how does Karen react when the tables are turned in the most unexpected way? Stick around because this story is just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let me set the stage a bit. I've lived in this neighborhood for years, and honestly, I've never had any issues with my neighbors, except for Karen. She's the type that's always on the lookout for a reason to call someone out, especially if it involves noise. It doesn't matter if it's a birthday party, a barbecue, or even just kids playing outside. If she hears anything out of the ordinary, she's quick to report it. And sure enough, this time she was at it again. This party wasn't some wild rager. It was a laid-back afternoon with close friends, a few drinks, and laughter filling the air. We had all agreed to keep the noise in check, making sure the music wasn't too loud and everything stayed chill. Yet, somehow, Karen still found it too much. I figured she'd call the HOA or maybe talk to me directly, but nope. She took it to the next level, calling the cops. What she didn't know, though, was that the cops weren't coming just to break things up. They were part of a community initiative, a fundraiser to support local programs. I remember the officers arriving, flashing their lights, and getting out of their patrol cars with those big smiles, ready to mingle. It was supposed to be a fun, light-hearted moment, but I could tell things were about to get awkward, very awkward. As the officers walked towards the backyard, I could see Karen standing by her front door, watching intently. I could feel the heat rise in my chest, knowing what was coming. I wasn't sure if she was hoping they'd shut everything down or if she just wanted to see us all squirm. Either way, it felt like we were about to get caught in some weird, uncomfortable standoff. The officers greeted everyone with big smiles, introducing themselves as part of the local police department's fundraising event. They even handed out flyers about the charity they were supporting, which only made the whole situation more surreal. Karen's face was a mixture of confusion and disbelief. She had no idea what she was about to find out. I couldn't help but glance over at her, waiting for her reaction as she processed what was happening. She clearly didn't know whether to smile or storm over and try to explain herself. For a second, I almost felt bad for her. She'd clearly gone out of her way to make a big deal about the noise, but now everything was turning upside down. But before I could even process what was going on, Karen stormed over to the officers. She started talking so fast, her words stumbling over each other. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, pointing at the pool. "They're too loud. This whole neighborhood is being disturbed. You should have shut this down." The officers, still calm and friendly, tried to explain that they were there to help raise money for the community, but Karen wasn't having it. She wasn't about to back down. I could see the tension building. A few of my guests awkwardly looked at each other, unsure whether to laugh or step back from the drama unfolding. And then I realized something that hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't the only one who had been caught in the crossfire of Karen's overzealous protection of the neighborhood. She'd done this before, several times in fact. I overheard one of the officers telling Karen, "We're just here for the fundraiser, ma'am. Maybe you should take it up with the HOA if you have a problem with the noise." But Karen wasn't about to let go that easily. She turned to the officer, face flushed with anger, demanding, "You're just letting them get away with this because it's your fundraiser?" This is unfair. At that moment, everything seemed to stop. The music faded into the background, and for a moment, I just stood there, wondering if this was actually happening. It felt like the whole neighborhood was watching, some from their windows, others from the sidewalks. I could see a few of the neighbors who weren't at the party slowly making their way outside, curious to see how this confrontation would play out. I had no idea how things were going to unfold, but it was clear that Karen wasn't going to back down. I glanced at the officers, who were now exchanging looks with each other. It was almost as if they were trying to figure out how to de-escalate the situation without making things worse. One officer, a woman with short, dark hair, calmly spoke up. "Ma'am, we understand you're upset, but we're just here to support a good cause. We're not here to shut anyone down. If you have concerns about the party, you'll need to take that up with the HOA." Karen was practically shaking at this point. She glared at the officer, but before she could respond, another voice cut in from the crowd. A neighbor, Mr. Thompson from down the street, stepped forward and called out, "Honestly, Karen, you've been overreacting about everything lately. This is a fundraiser for the cops. What's the big deal?" For a split second, Karen seemed taken aback, as if she wasn't used to people openly challenging her. She opened her mouth to argue, but then hesitated. And that's when I realized just how deep this conflict had become. It wasn't just about the party anymore. It wasn't even just about Karen's need for control. This was personal for her. The air was thick with tension. I wasn't sure if I should step in and say something or if I should just let it play out. But something inside me told me that if I didn't say something soon, Karen's tirade was about to escalate even further. I could feel the crowd around us, the eyes on me and on Karen, waiting for the next move. Would I let her win, or would I stand up for my friends and the fundraiser? As the silence stretched on, I could feel the weight of everyone's expectations. What happened next could change everything. The moment Mr. Thompson spoke up, the whole crowd seemed to hold its breath. Karen's face twisted into a tight frown as she turned to him, her eyes narrowing with fury. "Excuse me, Thompson, but this isn't about you," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the air. She turned back to the officers, practically seething now. "This is a problem with noise, with disruption. I won't stand for it." The officers exchanged looks, clearly trying to maintain their calm, but even they couldn't ignore the rising tension. Karen wasn't backing down, and I could see that the more she raged, the more she alienated herself from everyone else in the neighborhood. People were starting to shift uncomfortably, whispering to each other, wondering how this was all going to end. I glanced at my friends, who were still huddled near the pool, unsure of what to do. Everyone was trying to be polite, but the stress was starting to show. I could feel my heart racing. Part of me wanted to step forward and just tell Karen to calm down, but this wasn't worth the fight. But another part of me wanted to let her know just how ridiculous this whole thing was. How far was she willing to push before she realized she was in the wrong? And then it happened. Karen, in a final act of desperation, turned to the officer who had been the most patient with her and pointed directly at me. "This whole party is a nuisance," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You should be shutting this down right now. How can you stand there and let this happen when it's clearly disturbing the peace?" The officer took a deep breath, clearly trying to keep her cool. "Ma'am, we've already explained. We're here for the fundraiser. We're not here to stop a neighborhood party." But Karen wasn't hearing it. She didn't care about the fundraiser. She didn't care that people were raising money for a good cause. All she cared about was having things her way. And as the words kept spilling out her mouth, I noticed something I hadn't before. The other neighbors were beginning to side with the officers. There were murmurs of support, quiet comments like, "Karen, you're going too far, and this isn't how you handle things." It was becoming a standoff, Karen against the entire neighborhood. The officers stood firm, their body language relaxed but alert, sensing that things were close to tipping over. The crowd around us started to grow, more neighbors stepping outside to see the drama unfold. Some of them shook their heads, clearly fed up with Karen's antics. I could feel the weight of their judgment, the tension in the air thickening with each passing second. Every word Karen said seemed to push her further away from the support she had once had, and closer to becoming a pariah in the neighborhood. I could tell things were nearing a breaking point. Something had to give, and fast. Karen, her hands trembling with rage, turned back to me. "This is all your fault," she screamed, pointing right at me. "If you hadn't thrown this ridiculous party, none of this would have happened. You're ruining the neighborhood." My mind raced. I wanted to defend myself, to say something that would shut her down. But the look in her eyes, like she was about to explode, stopped me in my tracks. I knew that if I said the wrong thing, everything would spiral out of control. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen was standing there, red-faced and shaking, and everyone else was watching, waiting for the next move. I felt the weight of everyone's eyes on me, and I knew this moment would define everything. The stakes had never been higher. What would happen if I pushed back? Would she make an even bigger scene? Would the officers have to intervene? Or worse, would the entire neighborhood turn against me, turning this peaceful event into a disaster? I could feel the pressure mounting, each second that ticked by adding more intensity to the situation. The crowd's energy was shifting, and I could sense that they were ready for something to happen, anything to break the tension. I wasn't sure if this was the right moment to speak, or if I should just let the officers handle it. But one thing was certain: Karen had pushed things too far, and the next few moments would decide everything. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that whatever happened next, nothing was going to be the same. The showdown was on the edge, and I was right in the middle of it. Just as I opened my mouth to respond to Karen's tirade, something unexpected happened. The sound of sirens blared in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. The officers didn't flinch. They'd clearly heard it before, but the rest of us couldn't help but look around in confusion. Karen, still shaking with rage, barely noticed. She was too focused on her own battle to realize the new threat looming over us. The sirens grew closer and closer, until a shiny black SUV pulled up at the end of our street. At first, I thought it was another officer, maybe a backup, ready to settle things down. But as the vehicle came to a stop, a tall man in a sharp suit stepped out, his presence commanding attention. His confident stride and the way he looked around the street made it clear he wasn't just some random driver. He was someone important.